Hey guys, welcome back to The Crime Sheet. I'm Andrea Cipriano, and in today's video, I want to talk about the real-life serial killers behind Netflix's original series, Mindhunter. Mindhunter is a Netflix original series that follows Holden Ford and Bill Tench, who are FBI agents, and they're working to kind of bring together psychology and crime fighting in one. This show is based on the true story of FBI agent John Douglas, who is the writer of the original book Mindhunter, and his partner Ron Ressler. The unit that they created in the FBI always had some kind of backlash from the actual department, so the idea that they built the unit from the ground up is both literal and kind of metaphorical. Literal in that, and you can see this in the first season, the FBI essentially banishes them to the basement of one of the buildings because they originally believed that marrying psychology and crime fighting is just impossible and it's a huge waste of time.
It is not our job to commiserate with these people. It is our job to electrocute them.
We can't like everything we do.
How do we get ahead of crazy if we don't know how crazy thinks?
Ron Ressler is coined for being the creator of the term serial killer, which everybody uses now and everybody is really familiar with that.
Serial killers.
New terminology.
The behavioral science unit as a whole also created new categories for killers, so that's where we get terms like organized, disorganized, mixed killer, spree killer, just things like that that are pretty textbook. You would think would have existed before 1972, but they didn't. These are the agents that really brought this kind of education to life and used it to help catch serial killers and kind of start to categorize their behavior. So in season 1, by far the most memorable killer that we meet is Edmund Kemper. Ed Kemper was a giant of a man. He stood at 6 foot 9 inches and he was believed to have an IQ of about 145, which makes him one of that is top tier genius, which is actually really unfortunate because he was one of the most graphic killers of the bunch that we meet here in the season. Kemper was born in California in 1948, and even at a young age, he started to exhibit some behaviors that would indicate future criminal behavior. Now, not to say that any of these behaviors say that, oh, well, if you have one of these, then it means that you will be a serial killer in the future. It's just when you mix a lot of these circumstances together, it can kind of create behaviors that mimic that. So, for example, he was bedwetting past the age of 12, and he had a serious history of animal cruelty. The family had cats in the home. Most notably, when he was younger, there was one cat that he actually buried alive, subsequently killing the cat and eventually dismembering it and displaying its head. So the family didn't know that it was Ed to begin with. You know, they were just kind of like, whoa, what is this? Like, somebody in the neighborhood is tormenting our family and killed our cat. And Ed actually found a lot of pleasure in the fact that his family couldn't identify that it was him that did it. It wasn't until a few years later where a similar thing happened. One of their family cats was found mutilated and killed. Ed's mom actually found some of the pieces of the cat in Ed's closet. So that very quickly tied him to that kind of behavior. And of course, I mean, discovering that, as a mom, discovering that from your son, I mean, is just unimaginable. And on top of that, Ed's mom already really didn't like him. They had a very abusive relationship. It was later that when his parents divorced, Ed hated his mom so much that he waited a little bit to finally move out and follow his dad. But unfortunately, and I think this kind of led to a lot of the heartbreak that he felt from that, his dad remarried, and in that he now had step-siblings. And so he felt very removed, and like the one person that he could kind of count on to save him from his mom abandoned him. So he later moved in with his grandparents, and well, it was his father's parents, so his paternal grandparents. But even then, his grandma on that side was exhibiting a lot of the same behaviors that his mom was. She was very abusive. She put him down constantly, and Ed even says that she really emasculated him, which was just infuriating. So there was one day where his grandfather was out getting groceries, and Ed just took one of the guns in the home and point blank killed his grandma. And it wasn't until later, where his grandfather was coming home, that he was still out in the driveway, where Ed realized, oh my God, I don't want my grandpa to see his wife dead in the kitchen here. So he went out and he killed his grandfather. It was because of those 2 killings of his grandparents that he spent 6 years in a rehab facility for juveniles, and he eventually convinced the psychologist there that he was safe enough to be released and that he didn't have any more anger in him, and it was just a mistake that he made when he was younger. So unfortunately, after that, he moved right back in with his mom, who was the source of his pain, his anger, and his resentment towards women. So as he got older and grew up with her in the house, now having this record, his mom constantly belittled him and said that, you know, he was a nut and that she hated him. And so again, these feelings of alienation coming back from his mom was just heightened, and everything happened all over again. When he was 21, he started targeting female hitchhikers in the area. He would pick them up, and then instead of take them to the location that they requested, he would take them to a remote area, and then he was, again, Edmund Kemper was one of the most graphic killers that we see in Mindhunter, and I would almost argue that I've ever even had to look at. He would mutilate, kill these women, dismember them, and in almost every case he would take the women's bodies back to the home where he lived with his mom, and he would bury them in the backyard and angle their heads to look up at his mom's window. And in a sense, when I read that, my first reaction is, wow, like, if you didn't think that his mom was the source of his anger and his hatred towards women, that clearly displays it. The fact that he would kill, mutilate women, and then bury their heads to look up at her was, I mean, that's just so disturbing. And even in some of the interviews that he's given, because Edmund Kemper has been very vocal about his own criminal psychology. He's participated in the making of many documentaries. He's even said that he did that in a way because his mom was always wanting people to look up at her, so here he was doing that. He was giving her people to look up to her in a very sick and twisted way. It didn't take long for him to finally turn that anger onto the source itself.
I knew a week before she died I was gonna kill her.
I knew a week before she died I was gonna kill her.
She went out to a party,
she got soused.
She came home alone.
I was woken up by that. I came out.
You know, that night I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before. She says, "Oh, I suppose you're gonna want to wait up all night and talk now."
He killed his mother, mutilated her, did a lot of very nasty things, and later called one of her best friends over to the home just to kill her as well. So later he ended up calling the police and turning himself in. He was obviously arrested, and eventually when they dug up the property that he was living on, found all of the other evidence that connected him to a lot of the missing women. In 1973, he was found guilty of all of the counts of murder, but Edmund actually requested that he would be given the death penalty. At the time, California had it suspended, so they couldn't do that even though he requested it. And so since then, he's actually still spending out the rest of his sentence in California in prison. He has been repeatedly denied parole, and since 1980, every single time he's actually been up for parole, he's denied to even have a hearing. He's even been quoted saying recently that he's much happier in prison, and he believes that society is not ready to have somebody like him enter into that space. He is currently 70 years old and still carrying out the rest of his sentence. Next in the show, we meet Jerry Brudos, aka the shoe fetish slayer. Brudos murdered at least 4 women in Oregon, all within a year between 1968 and 1969. Fans of Mindhunter will definitely remember him, most notably because of the scene where Holden Ford brings him kind of a peace offering, brings him a pair of shoes, and a big part of that is because he thinks that this will get Brudos to open up to him about his own psychology and the reasons for why he committed the crimes, and it definitely does the trick. Brudos opens up about how when he was a young boy, it was very apparent that his mom did not want a boy. She openly said, "I wish I had a girl," and I think that would definitely get into anybody's psyche. And so for him, playing with the idea of gender is shown through pretty much all of his crimes. Even when he was younger, he has a distinct memory of being in a junkyard and finding a stiletto heel. Now, he wanted to take it home, but his mom was saying, "Absolutely not, that is such a weird thing to want. You know, you're just such a creep." And in first grade, he even tried to take the shoes off of his teacher's feet, which is, again, playing up this idea of gender roles, and even having to hear when he was a kid so often that, "Oh, I wish you were a girl." Of course, he was kind of gravitating towards something that was feminine, also because it was kind of taboo being a young boy. He spent a lot of his teen years in and out of psychotherapy, and it even started to escalate at some point when he would stalk women, choke them, knock them out in some way, shape, or form, and leave with their shoes. Again, we're talking about the signature that he has when it comes to all of his crimes. He even married pretty young and had his wife walk around the house wearing nothing other than high heels. And he would also apparently take pictures of her and take pictures of himself with the shoes on. So I think psychotherapy was the right thing for him, and he could have definitely used a little bit more of it. He created a murder man cave in his own garage where he set up an intercom system for his wife so that she would never walk in on him doing something creepy, or also because he used that space as storage for some of the victims and the body parts that he had procured over the time of his killings. Eventually, he was arrested because a fisherman found some of the bodies that he had dumped, and authorities were able to link it back to him. He died in prison in 2006 from liver cancer. Next up from season 1 is spree killer Richard Speck. Fans will remember him from the scene where he kills a bird that only moments ago he was nurturing and feeding, and also because Holden has a fangirl moment over one of his tattoos that he wants to see to kind of try to build some rapport with this guy. So the tattoo, Born to Raise Hell, does actually exist. He did have it tattooed on his arm, and it was actually because of that marker that one of the women who escaped his slaying that night was able to identify him later. One night in 1966, Speck was out just kind of going about his business, and I guess he had an urge to become an insane criminal for an evening, and found an apartment where there was 9 medical students. They were all female nurses that were living in this one apartment, and he broke in, made his way in there, bound up, tied the women, separated them, and throughout the whole night just raped and killed everybody. I guess he says that he lost count of how many women that were there because one of them was able to kind of not sneak away, but she was able to hide under one of the beds in the rooms for the entirety of the night until he left the next morning. And so it was because of her quick thinking and her ability to get away from him for the time being that she was able to escape, alert the police, and again, it was the tattoo that eventually allowed her to identify him. So his situation is really interesting because he has come out and said since then that he still has no feeling for what happened, that he can't really put his finger on what motivated him to want to just rape and kill that many women in one sitting. And even since then, he said that, well, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He died the night before he was going to turn 50, and he died by himself in prison. This next person in the show does a really great job of hiding the identity of who he is. We only get to see little bits of him in vignettes in the cold openings of every episode, and you only get to see parts of him where, for example, he's tying knots, he's creating a murder kit, and then even at the end, he's burning drawings of women who are tied up. All of these together make you think like, wow, this is somebody who's definitely not in their right mind. We see that he's devolving into a killer, and still by the end of season 1, you don't know exactly who he is, but upon further research, you can figure out that he is the BTK killer. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you don't want to know any more spoilers about season 2, I would just say you can click out and exit of the video here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and you can go ahead, hit subscribe, hit the like button, even hit the little notification bell to get notified for when I upload. And don't forget to come back after you finish watching, and I'm sure binge watching, the second season of Mindhunter. Come on back, take a look at some of the other serial killers that we're gonna see in season 2, and make sure to leave a comment below. So thanks, guys. So getting back to the BTK killer. At first, I heard some rumors about season 2 where they said that, oh, he's not going to be the main focus anymore. He's not even going to be in the season. All of those rumors were absolutely put to bed when you watch one of the trailers. There is a quick moment where the trailer actually flashes at you a guy wearing a female mask. And again, when you do your research and you find out who the BTK killer is and some of the methods and things that he did while binding, torturing, and killing these women, BTK, you see that the man wearing a mask is actually him. And there's even some really disturbing photographs where he would take pictures of himself reenacting what he had did to the victims, and he would have them wear the mask, he would wear it. It was a weird situation with this female face. And again, you see this in the second season trailer, and so that's how we know that the BTK killer, his story is brought through this next season. The next guy that we see flash very quickly in one of the trailers is David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, who was also known as the .44 caliber killer, and that was because it was in connection to the kind of gun that he was using. Between the summer of 1967 and July of 1977, he killed 6 people and wounded 7 in New York City. And essentially what David Berkowitz did was he would go around the 5 boroughs and stalk people who were sitting in their cars. He carried his gun around with him, and when they weren't paying attention, he would just absolutely just shoot through the windows and just try to do as much damage as he could to, and they were usually women as well, but try to do as much damage to the people as possible. His crimes got him a lot of press and a lot of notoriety, and the NYPD couldn't find him for a long time. At some point, he actually started leaving little notes that would just taunt the police, and eventually newspapers just kept republishing them, which would just give him even more notoriety and make him feel like he had even more power. He did confess to all of the killings. Originally, and this is where the son of Sam comes in, originally he said that it was his neighbor's dog that was telling him to do these things, his neighbor's name being Sam, and so part of this comes into the idea that he was trying to play off that he was mentally unfit to stand trial and even mentally unfit to even understand what he was doing. He later came out and said that it was just an absolute hoax and he just wanted to mess with the people and mess with the media. Next up, we see that Holden and Ford are going to be spending a significant amount of time down in Atlanta, Georgia, consulting on a case where 22 young African-American children are missing.
I'm sending you both. I want you there for the duration.
So all these children, one killer.
I believe that to be the case.
It wasn't until John Douglas came to help investigate the crimes that he proposed the idea, in the same way that Holden Ford is in the show, that these children are going missing because of the hands of an African-American male, meaning that he was able to blend into the neighborhood in a way that a white male wouldn't.
It's statistically rare for serial killers to cross racial lines.
Eventually, John Douglas was right. They caught a man named Wayne Williams who was directly tied to the killings of 2 young men, and later, through some other evidence that they collected, they specifically linked him to 11 cases. And so there's still some question about where the other 11 of the 22 fit into this scenario. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the show kind of adapts that, because we don't even know to this day how or if he's connected to all of these cases. So it looks like Wayne Williams' story is still going to be really front and center in this next season. Lastly, in the end of the Mindhunter Season 2 trailer, we see that Holden finally gets his wish of wanting to interview Charles Manson. This is pretty similar to how the actual situation went with John Douglas. He wanted to interview Manson right from the beginning of when the behavioral science unit was created, but it took them some time to get to the credibility that they had so that he could actually go and interview him. We actually just passed the 50th anniversary of the Tate murders, which Charles Manson perpetrated through using members of his cult called the Family, where he psychologically coerced these hippies into becoming murderers. And I actually just wrote an article about that on my blog. I can link the link down below if you want to go read it. And it's just me explaining the psychology behind how somebody could essentially brainwash 30 people into becoming killing machines. Mindhunter returns with its second season this Friday, August 16th. I really can't wait to binge watch it, which I'm sure you are going to be doing as well. It's a great show. I can't wait for this new season. I've been waiting a long time, and it comes just before school starts, which makes me super happy because this is gonna be like my last little taste of summer before I have to get back into the gear of school and everything. So I'm really looking forward to it. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you learned a little bit about some of the serial killers that we saw in the first season and that we're going to be seeing in this next season. Definitely go ahead, hit subscribe, hit the like button down below. Give me a comment. I want to know what you think who is the most interesting story here. I would definitely be really interested in doing some more research on some of these guys, and so if that's something that you want to see, definitely let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do a video about somebody's story. So yeah, thanks again and happy viewing.